Deep in the heart of Siberia, something lies beneath the frozen ground, and no one wants to tell you what it is. In 1883, a report coming from the most remote corners of Russia suddenly vanished. The scientist who wrote it never came back, and what was written inside the report is still stamped "Does not exist" in official archives to this day. So what did this man see? What did he find in the frozen Siberian soil? Something so threatening that an entire empire felt compelled to bury it. Today, I'm going to tell you about one of the greatest cover-up operations in history. And after you hear this story, you will never look at the mythology sections of museums the same way again. Because those giants were never a myth. They were real. They were in Siberia. And just like us, they had a job to do. Now travel back for a moment to the mid-1800s. The world is changing rapidly. The Industrial Revolution is transforming continents. Cities are reaching toward the sky. Railways are cutting through deserts. But behind this massive construction boom lies a secret that no history book has ever dared to explain. What is that secret? How were these enormous stones transported? How were these massive columns put into place? Today, the world's most advanced cranes struggle to lift some ancient building blocks. So who was doing this back then? History tells you, slaves and simple pulleys. But the truth is much bigger, both literally and figuratively. Much, much bigger. Siberia, the largest, most desolate, least explored landmass on Earth. For centuries, Tsarist Russia used these lands as a penal colony. Why? Because those who went there never came back. But was it really just the cold that stopped them from returning? Look at the oral histories of Siberia's indigenous tribes. Every single one shares a common theme. Beings living in the forest, human in form but enormous in size. They describe them as the last guardians of Tartaria. Not just guardians, but workers of the forest. Beings who cut trees, carried stones, and carved mountains. Why would these tribes tell these stories? What do they gain from it? Nothing. Because this is not a myth. This is a memory. This is not fiction. Tartaria. Have you heard this word? Most likely you haven't, or if you have, you dismissed it with a vague description like a legendary Central Asian empire. But Tartaria is one of the most systematically erased civilizations in history. Look at old maps, European maps from the 1600s and 1700s. You'll see a massive empire covering most of Siberia, with clearly drawn borders, Tartaria Magna. Then you move into the 1800s, and that name slowly fades from the maps, shrinks, and finally disappears entirely. An empire doesn't just vanish. It was erased. And the greatest secret of that empire was its guardians. Who were these guardians? The giants of Tartaria were not merely mythological figures. They were a workforce. Think about it. Who could efficiently cut through Siberia's endless forests? Look at the records claiming that Siberian giants stood an average of 4 to 6 meters tall. For a being of that size, a massive pine tree is no different than a piece of firewood to you. Ancient Tartarian documents, which some alternative history researchers claim to have decoded, suggest that Tartaria used these giants as both forest workers and master builders. Without these giants, there is no explanation for Siberia's ancient structures, the megalithic ruins that still cannot be understood today. What we call ancient world technology was largely not technology at all. It was a workforce. And that workforce was giant in size, and the giants were doing the work. Now let's add some evidence from around the world to support this theory. 1845, Tennessee. A farmer plowing his land discovers bones beneath the soil that resemble a human skeleton. But the dimensions match nothing we know. A skull approximately 3.5 meters long, with proportional limb bones. The local newspaper runs the story, then silence. The bones are sent to the Smithsonian Institution. And there, they disappear. 1856, Iowa. A similar discovery. Again local news, again the Smithsonian, again, gone. The claim that the Smithsonian systematically collected giant skeletons and then destroyed them is still being voiced by researchers today. The official response is always the same. No documents, no records, cannot be proven. But does the absence of a document prove the event didn't happen? Or does it prove just how successful the erasure was? Let them try to hide and erase, but the truth can never truly be erased. And now, come to 1883. Siberia. The missing report we mentioned earlier. The subject of that report is what researchers have named the last giants of Siberia. Inside the frozen layers of Earth, buried in mud, skeletal remains of human anatomy, but extraordinary in size. And beside them, also buried in mud, tools of enormous proportions. You can't call it an axe, imagine an axe, but the size of a house. Who could these tools have been made for? Who were they designed for? The person who compiled the report handed the documents over to be sent to the Tsar's palace. And then, nothing. The document was classified. The researcher never returned from the expedition he was sent on. The archives were sealed. Have you heard of the Mudflood? According to the Mudflood theory, some kind of global catastrophe struck the world in the early 1800s. Not an earthquake, not a volcanic eruption. Something stranger. Cities were buried under earth. Buildings were suddenly found with their ground floor windows submerged. To this day, you can find semi-buried buildings around the world. No basement, yet half underground. According to this theory, this catastrophe was a deliberate or natural reset of the old world, the Great Reset. And the new order that came after this reset took it upon itself to erase every trace of the old world. It wiped Tartaria off the map. It distorted the origins of ancient structures. And most importantly, it destroyed the workforce of that civilization, the giants, both physically and historically. The giant lumberjacks of Siberia stand at the very center of this picture. When the mud flood came, they were buried in the frozen earth. The mud covered everything. And the survivors, the founders of the New World, chose to close this chapter rather than return and excavate. Because admitting that giants existed meant admitting that Tartaria existed. And admitting that Tartaria existed meant the collapse of the entire official historical narrative. And no empire, no state, ever admits that its own foundation is rotten. So why Siberia? Why a place so remote, so cold, so inaccessible? Maybe it wasn't chosen. Maybe that was simply their place. Maybe Siberia was isolated, populated, and controlled so systematically precisely because it was the last stronghold of giant civilization. Was it a coincidence that Tsarist Russia used Siberia as a place of punishment? Or was it the most effective way to control who went to those lands, what they encountered, and what they saw? I believe Siberia was chosen because it was the easiest and least conspicuous region in which to carry out this erasure and destruction. And so we return to that missing report. 1883. Siberia. Giants buried in mud. Enormous tools beside them. And a man who documented it all, then nothing. Perhaps that report contained more than just bones. Perhaps it contained a truth, the record of a giant civilization, of Tartaria, and of its last remnants, those who worked in the forests, carried stones, cut down trees. And that truth was not recorded to be seen. It was recorded to be buried, just as Siberia's frozen ground buried the giants themselves. Official history tells you, giants never existed. I ask you this, why would you need to so carefully hide something that never existed in the first place? Honestly, does that make any sense to you?